Fred VanVleet has recently spoken out on his departure from the Toronto Raptors, speaking on the Adrian Wojnarowski podcast, and he had some very interesting comments. So we'll break those down, including Gradey Dick addressing some drama regarding his three-point shot, particularly his jump shooting form being changed and his struggles from behind the three-point line, and a former Toronto Raptor has retired. So lots of stuff to break down in this video. Without further ado, let's jump into the first topic of discussion. First thing we're taking a look at is Fred VanVleet speaking out on his Raptors departure. Now, obviously, Fred VanVleet was the starting point guard for the Toronto Raptors for the past couple of seasons. Was the follow-up to the Raptors' Grote and Kyle Lowry, and he was received by mixed reviews, certainly. There were moments where he looked amazing, was an all-star for this Raptors team, and then particularly last season looked a step slow. Efficiency wasn't that great, and a lot of the Toronto Raptors fans kind of turned on him, and there's question marks about whether or not he'd stay, he'd leave, how much money he'd get, but inevitably he left for the Houston Rockets in free agency this summer, and made a lot of money. Got a gigantic contract. The Houston Rockets ended up firing out a giant bag for Fred VanVleet, $40+ million. Now, it wasn't like the front office of the Toronto Raptors didn't want him back, and shocked a lot of people, the money that the Toronto Raptors are willing to offer him, upwards of $30 to $35 million per year annually. But Fred VanVleet was receiving more annual income from Houston, better state taxes, all that type of stuff. So he went down to Houston and had some interesting comments now recently on the Wojnarowski podcast, addressing why he ended up leaving. Basically, one of the big quotes that are going around is saying that it was just time where it was like, okay, it's starting to go around Scotty Barnes, and my value probably wasn't as great as it was in Houston, there in Toronto Raptors, given the fact that the Raps are moving younger in theory, right? That's sort of the comments that Fred VanVleet made. They want the ball in Scotty Barnes' hands more often, and this is something we've heard a lot about, and we've seen a little bit more. Obviously, Scotty's been more involved in the offense this season, but that's an interesting comment from Fred VanVleet to directly address, Scotty Barnes and the offense being put around him. Doesn't want to take a secondary option in terms of being that sort of main facilitator, that main ball handler, which I find really interesting because the Toronto Raptors won an NBA championship with Fred VanVleet being that secondary ball handler behind Kyle Lowry. Heck, you might even be able to make the argument behind Kawhi Leonard, as he had the ball in his hands for a large chunk of those offensive schemes. And Fred VanVleet was really strong at being a floor spacer, being able to attack, not necessarily finish around the rim, but get some paint touches and swing the basketball, make some good passes, as that sort of third main ball handling option out there on the court. But it seemed like with the Scotty Barnes sort of emergence, he wanted to move in a different direction. He also addressed on the podcast, his relationship with the Toronto Raptors front office and organization. Says there's no bad blood. There's all love between Fred VanVleet, Masai Ujiri in the front office. So it wasn't a case of Fred VanVleet leaving, and these are essentially the same story we've heard since Fred VanVleet has left. He loves Toronto. He loves particularly his relationship with the team and the front office. I mean, why wouldn't you? I mean, the Raptors were going to offer him a lot of money there as well. So, Fred VanVleet, I know a lot of Raptors fans turned on him. I'm still a fan of the guy. He's balling out down there in Houston. They're shocking a lot of people. No crazy, they're not the top of the West or anything, but they've been really good. Struggling on the road, winning a lot of games at home. They're a young team being guided by Dillon Brooks and Fred VanVleet, and surprisingly, it's working out really well. You got Ime Udoka out there, roasting LeBron and all that. So, shout out to Fred VanVleet. Interesting comments regarding his departure from the Toronto Raptors. But another interesting story, another Toronto Raptors, I guess current Toronto Raptor player, addressing some drama, or at least addressing some news, has been Gradey Dick, who obviously is the Raptors lottery pick for this season. And one of the biggest concerns regarding Gradey Dick this year has been his lack of three-point shooting. He was pegged as the best shooter in the draft when he was selected by the Toronto Raptors. Again, 6'6", mobile, and he's been doing a lot of little things out there on the court, which has been great. He's cutting, he's moving, he's driving, he's slashing, he's doing all these types of things, but without a consistent three-point shot, that's what Gradey Dick's game is sort of built around. The rest of it is all icing on top of that cake, but everything sort of surrounds the fact that teams have to chase him off the line, and he's been surprisingly able to burn people when they do chase him off the line and stuff, but right now, he just hasn't been shooting a high enough percentage, from behind the three-point stripe to really warrants, that best draft or shooter in the draft, at least so far this season. And there's some speculation. I forgot to grab the screenshot of it here now, but Sam Decker was a former Toronto Raptor, I guess former Toronto Raptor training camp player, from a couple last seasons ago, comparable player to Gradey Dick as a guy that evolved his game to be a three-point sniper, three-point shooter, among those types of things. And he reacted to some video footage of Gradey Dick essentially shooting the ball and saying, why would they change his form? It's kind of crazy that the Toronto Raptors would go out there. Whoever ended up changing Gradey Dick's form, it doesn't make sense. And that caused a stir. That caused an uproar on Toronto Raptors Twitter, Reddit, wherever the heck it may be, because Gradey Dick's been struggling from behind the three-point line. We've seen rookies in the past have training coaches get a little overzealous and then change their forms to the point where they really struggle shooting. Markelle Fultz is obviously the prime example of that. So, Gradey Dick changed form, lower three-point percentages. A lot of people sort of got worried when they heard those comments, when they heard those things being said. But Gradey Dick came out and addressed all that recently, basically saying that I haven't changed my shot my entire life. I've had the same shot since my mom made it when I was 3 years old. Gradey Dick dismisses the idea of the Toronto Raptors changing his jump shot. So I find it interesting. I hope Gradey Dick isn't shooting the. I mean, every 3-year-old I feel like is shooting with two hands. Maybe that's why Gradey Dick's an elite shooter. His mom instilled in him. Get that guide hand on the side, get that elbow tucked in, all that type of stuff. Well, Gradey Dick, his form still looks polished. Again, from the games I saw in that clip that was there, maybe the arguments could be made for things along those lines, but Gradey Dick's jump shot has looked still the same aesthetically pleasing jump shot we've seen from his highlights in college. He's shooting them still with confidence and all those types of things. They just haven't been going in at the greatest clip, heck, even in the G League. So there has been some concerns about Gradey Dick's just ability to facilitate. Maybe it's the deeper three-point line getting adjusted, all that type of stuff. Personally, I think Gradey Dick will be fine. I don't think there's nothing egregious, nothing bad like we've seen Markelle Fultz having the hitch in the jump shot or anything like that changed along those lines. But I don't know. It's nice to know that Gradey Dick still has confidence in his form and all those types of things, not trying to tweak little things, because anyone that's played basketball at semi-high level knows when you're fooling around either form, if you're sort of a shooter, or it takes a long time to sort of get into rhythm, especially if it's a drastic change. So happy that Gradey Dick isn't having his form completely overhauled, given the fact he is an elite three-point sniper, at least was coming into the NBA. The final thing we're taking a look at is a former three-point sniper for the Toronto Raptors, also dunk master. I don't know if that's the right word to throw out for Terrence Ross. Definitely dunk contest champion, all that type of stuff. Streaky shooter, at least. But Terrence Ross recently came out, and revealed some wild news that he is officially retiring after being in the NBA for over a decade. So shout out to Terrence Ross, again, a guy that caused a lot of people some headaches with the Toronto Raptors, but definitely had one of the most aesthetically pleasing jumpers I've ever seen in probably basketball history. I just loved how high it was. The release, it was always smooth looking. Even though he was really streaky, even though he could jump out the gym, but really like to go into contact and those types of things, he's a really fun player for the Toronto Raptors. Ended up breaking out, bursting onto the scene for the Orlando Magic, and it's one of those sneaky trades that should be credited to helping the Toronto Raptors win a championship. Without him, we don't get Serge Ibaka. So, Serge was obviously a key piece in winning the title. So Terrence Ross gets one of those semi-rings that everyone was trying to give to Mar and Jonas and those types of guys. But congrats to Terrence Ross on retiring. Again, wish him the best. I know he's podding, making videos and things along those lines. So welcome to the podcast world, even though you've been here for the last little while, T. Ross. But wishing the best for him. But always thought he would end up making his way back to Toronto. But wasn't the case. Never happened. Had a great career in the NBA. So wishing the best for him. Wishing the best for you guys as well, making this far. Subscribe to the channel if you guys haven't already. Anyways, I'm signing out. Cheers.